Chapter 1. The Golden Promise. They say love makes you blind. Mine made me sign. The first time he said I was lucky to have him, I laughed. The second time I believed him. The third he used my name to open a loan I never touched. By the time I realized his smile was just debt in disguise, it was too late to unsign, but not too late to make him pay interest on every lie. He told everyone I was nothing without him. He was half right because once I left, I became everything. I still remember the sound of his laugh. It wasn't cruel, not at first. It was confident, expensive, the kind of laugh that filled rooms and made people turn to look. Ethan Ward, 33 real estate star suit, always one shade too sharp, smile, always 1 second too practiced. He had that brand of charm that could convince anyone the world was a business pitch, and he was the deal you couldn't afford to miss. When we met, I was 26, still naive enough to think being intelligent would protect me from manipulation. I worked in finance risk analysis for mid-size investments. My world was spreadsheets, projections, logic. His world was champagne skyscrapers and open houses with too much glass and too little honesty. We met at a charity auction downtown, one of those events where people drink generosity and call it virtue. He bid on a painting no one wanted, turned to me, and whispered, "Sometimes you have to spend money just to look like you don't care about it." I laughed, thinking it was irony. It wasn't. Within a month, I was drawn into his orbit lunches that stretched into evenings, texts that bled into work hours. Ethan was magnetic. He listened just enough to make you think he cared, complimented just enough to make you forget he didn't. When he said, "You're not like the others," I believed him because I wanted to. He started small offering to help me understand real estate investing, even though I'd been managing portfolios for years. He'd explain things I already knew using the tone of a mentor, not a partner. "Lena, you're brilliant," he'd say, "but you think too small. You save. You plan. You're lucky you met someone like me, someone who actually knows how to take risks." Lucky, he said. That word stuck. We began sharing weekends at his apartment, an immaculate penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Everything gleamed: his watch collection, the marble counters, his smile. But there was something hollow beneath all that shine, like the echo inside an empty vault. He loved to perform wealth, the brand dinners, the bar tabs left unpaid until the last minute, the designer suit rentals he never returned. When I asked how he managed it all, he'd say, "Credit is just belief with a limit." At first, it was amusing, then it became alarming. He began borrowing small things: my Uber account, my PayPal for quick transfers. Once he borrowed my credit card to book a hotel for a client, meeting a charge that mysteriously doubled overnight. I told myself it was a mistake. Love makes accountants of fools. Then came the collapse. One of his sure-thing property flips went under, taking most of his liquidity with it. The tension between us grew like mold, silent, invasive. He stopped pretending to admire my discipline and started resenting it. "You think you're smarter than me because you save," he'd snap. "Real money doesn't sit in a bank, Lena. It moves." "It moves," I replied once, "and sometimes it moves away." He didn't like that. The first humiliation came quietly. We were at a dinner with his friends, agents, brokers, men, who measured success in square footage. One of them joked about relationships and money, and Ethan, half drunk, lifted his glass. "Lena's the best investment I ever made. Even if she's a little conservative, she keeps me grounded and funded." The table roared with laughter. My smile froze. When we got home, I confronted him. "Do you have any idea how that sounded?" He grinned lazily. "Relax, it's a joke. Do you think being cruel makes you clever?" He shrugged. "You're overreacting. People like confidence, Lena. You should try it." That night, I lay awake staring at the city lights reflecting through the window. I thought about every time he'd called me lucky. I thought about how often I'd believed him. 2 weeks later, the mask cracked. I came home early from work to find him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, voice sharp. "I told you I'll get the payment in. Just extend the deadline a few days." He turned when he saw me smile, switching on like a reflex. "Hey, babe. Just business." But the panic in his tone lingered after he hung up. I asked quietly, "How bad is it?" He sighed dramatically. "It's fine. Just cash flow issues. You wouldn't understand. You've never had real money." That's when I realized he wasn't apologizing for losing money. He was angry that I wasn't losing it with him. The next week, his firm's numbers hit the news, an internal audit gone wrong, missing funds, whispers of misrepresentation. Ethan laughed it off, but I saw the sweat behind the swagger. He began lashing out more, his words sharper, cutting me down in public and in private. You think you're better than me because you save receipts? Let's see how far your morality gets you when the world stops paying attention. He said it during an argument that ended with him storming out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the picture frames. The silence that followed was cleaner than any apology could have been. That night, I opened my drawer and took out the small flash drive I'd been keeping for months, my quiet insurance. Every transaction, every falsified statement I'd noticed, every email where he'd borrowed my accounts, all saved encrypted, backed up twice. He thought love was about possession. I was about precision. By morning, I'd transferred my savings into a separate crypto wallet and withdrawn from the joint account he'd insisted we open. Then I left no argument, no scene. Just a note on the counter. You said I was lucky to have you. Maybe you were right, because now I'm lucky to leave. 3 days later, a news alert hit my phone. Ward and Associates under investigation for client fund discrepancies. I didn't smile. Not yet. A week after that, my phone rang. Tracy Nguyen, my former mentor and now business partner in a small consultancy we'd been sketching for months. It's time, she said. You ready to build something real? I looked around the empty apartment at the skyline Ethan had always claimed he'd conquer. Yeah, I said. Let's give this city something worth investing in. The camera would fade here, city lights blinking below my reflection in the glass, turning from regret to resolve. Mini-climax, the day I walked away, wasn't the end of our story. It was the day I stopped being a supporting character in his. Because what he didn't know was that every empire built on arrogance already carries its own demolition date. And his, it was marked by my name on the bottom line. Chapter 2. The Collapse of Credit. The first thing I learned after walking away from Ethan was that peace is loud when you've been living in chaos. The silence of not being blamed, not being analyzed, not being measured against someone else's ego. It filled the apartment like sunlight through open blinds. I slept for 10 hours straight, woke up to coffee that actually stayed hot, and checked my accounts with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Every cent was where I'd left it. For the first time in 2 years, my balance wasn't emotional. It was financial. But Ethan didn't like silence. He preferred noise, attention, drama, an audience to perform for. And when he lost me, he found a new one. 2 weeks after I left, I got a notification, a tagged photo. Someone had posted from a real estate mixer Ethan in his signature suit, glass in hand, laughing too hard. The caption read, "Back on top. Some people just can't keep up." The next post hit harder. A video, Ethan at a dinner table surrounded by his colleagues. The sound quality was bad, but his voice carried. She thought she was the smart one. The financial girl. Said love wasn't about money until she realized she didn't have any. The table erupted with laughter. It wasn't the humiliation that stung, it was the lie. I could have ignored it, moved on. But revenge, I was starting to learn, isn't always fire. Sometimes it's math, quiet, exact, patient. I called Tracy. He's trying to rewrite the story, I said. Then we'll publish a better version, she replied. We met at her office, a tiny rented room above a cafe, still smelling of espresso and ambition. I showed her the footage. She watched, eyebrows arching. You want to go legal? She asked. Not yet, I said. I want him to feel the walls closing before he even knows they're moving. Tracy smiled. Then let's build the floor first. We finalized the business plan that night. Lumen Strategies, a consultancy for women in finance who wanted independence, not validation. Tracy handled legal setup, I took on marketing. My job was to create an identity strong enough that no rumor could touch it. By the end of the month, I had a logo, a website, and 2 clients, women who'd left toxic financial partnerships. One of them whispered during our first meeting, he said I'd never make it without him. I smiled gently. Then make it so well he can't afford to say that again. Meanwhile, Ethan's empire was wobbling. His firm Ward and Associates had lost a few major clients. A former investor had gone public about creative accounting. The city's gossip circles spun with speculation. Ethan laughed it off, posting quotes about resilience and betrayal as if he were the victim. His captions read like confessions dressed in poetry. Sometimes people can't handle success. The higher you climb, the stronger the wind. But wind doesn't break glass, impact does. Tracy called one morning with a grin I could hear through the phone. You'll love this. Ethan just made the business section and not the part with good news. The headline read, Real Estate Rising Star Faces Audit After Discrepancy in Client Funds. My stomach didn't twist, it settled. Karma doesn't rush, it itemizes. That week, I went to a networking brunch hosted by the city's Women in Finance Collective. It was my first public event since everything happened. As I walked in, conversations quieted slightly, not in pity but curiosity. Word traveled fast in the city. One woman approached me after my panel. You're Lena Wright. You used to date Ethan Ward. I braced myself. Yes. Her lips curved into a knowing smirk. Then you'll want to see this. She handed me her phone, a Reddit thread, thousands of upvotes. Exposing Ethan Ward Real Estate's golden fraud. Anonymous posts from former employees' clients, even one ex-colleague, all describing the same pattern, false partnerships, delayed payments, and one line that made my breath catch. He used his girlfriend's financial credentials to fake credibility on investor decks. That's when I knew he hadn't just stolen from me, he'd stolen me. Tracy nearly spit out her coffee when I told her. He's digging his own grave and live streaming it. Then let him, I said. He likes an audience. We watched it unfold, the Reddit post spread screenshots, circulated someone found old invoices linking his firm to shell companies. His followers defended him for a while until the numbers didn't add up. Lies collapse like credit slowly, then all at once. A month later, my firm got its first media mention, a small feature in the Financial Herald, Lumen Strategies empowering women to reclaim financial freedom. The timing couldn't have been better. Ethan's silence was deafening. Then out of nowhere he called. I recognized the number instantly. I shouldn't have answered. But closure sometimes needs to be heard to be believed. Lena, he said, voice smoother than ever. You've been busy. I have. Congratulations. Looks like you're doing great with my playbook. I laughed softly. You mean the one with fake accounts and unpaid debts? Don't play innocent, he snapped. You think people don't see through this victim act? You used me. I used you, I said. Ethan, I spent 2 years fixing your spreadsheets and your ego. The only thing I ever used was patience. There was a pause, that sharp intake of breath that sounds like pride cracking. You'll regret making me your enemy, he said finally. I didn't make you anything, I replied. You did that all by yourself. He hung up. That night I opened my laptop and started writing an article, The Currency of Control. It was about financial abuse in relationships, subtle, emotional, and devastating. I published it anonymously. Within 48 hours, it hit Reddit, then LinkedIn, then the Chicago Tribune. Thousands of women shared it. One comment read, "This sounds exactly like Ethan Ward." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. The next week, Ward and Associates announced a temporary suspension of operations pending internal review. Ethan posted one last quote before disappearing. Some people thrive on destroying others, but I'll rise again. Tracy messaged me the link with a single line, let him rise, gravity works. The mini-climax came 2 months later. I received an invitation to speak at a podcast about women in finance. The host, Michael Hayes, CEO of Orion Realty, Ethan's former boss. The topic, financial transparency in modern relationships. The irony was immaculate. I accepted. When the recording day arrived, I wore the simplest outfit I owned. No designer label, no statement jewelry, just confidence. Hayes greeted me warmly. Lena, your story inspired half this series, he said. Glad you agreed to join us. Halfway through the episode, as we discussed the dangers of ego in business, Hayes leaned closer to the mic. Speaking of which, he said, we're making some changes at Orion today. Accountability starts at home. Effective immediately, we've terminated an associate involved in misrepresentation. The name appeared on the teleprompter beside him, Ethan Ward. My breath caught, not in shock, but in poetic recognition. Hayes smiled. Funny how the truth always finds its receipts. When the episode aired, it trended overnight. The internet did what it always does, dissected, speculated, celebrated. I didn't comment. I didn't post. I just sat by the window watching the city glow, my phone lighting up with messages from people saying, "You're incredible, you won, he deserved it." But I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I felt balanced. Because revenge isn't a victory, it's a correction. And as I looked out over the skyline that once felt like his, I realized it was finally mine. Chapter 3. The Interest Accrues. It's strange how revenge matures. At first, it burns sharp and alive, but over time, it cools into precision. By the time Ethan's name began trending for all the wrong reasons, I wasn't angry anymore. I was auditing. The podcast with Michael Hayes exploded. Every major outlet quoted my line about financial transparency. They called me the voice of women reclaiming control. I didn't ask for that title, but it fit better than the girl who dated Ethan Ward. Meanwhile, Ethan's reputation bled out faster than his bank account. Former clients went public. One even recorded a teary video about being emotionally and financially manipulated. The comments section turned into a courtroom. I didn't add my verdict. The first email from Orion's compliance department arrived the following week, politely requesting I confirm details about the false partnerships he'd created. I attached the receipts literally. Bank statements, copies of messages, his forged signatures. I didn't need to say anything more. The evidence spoke the language he'd never understood: accountability. Tracy called that night voice half amusement, half awe. "You're trending under Love Isn't About Money," she said. "Do you realize what you've done?" I smiled faintly. No hashtags, just bookkeeping. Still, the exposure came with shadows. Fame, even the accidental kind, attracts attention. Reporters began emailing. Some wanted interviews, others wanted gossip. I declined all of them. Revenge loses its grace when you perform it. Then out of nowhere came an email from someone named Samantha, subject line, "I know what he did to you." My stomach tightened. The message was short. "He did it to me too, 3 years ago. But I didn't have proof. I saw your interview. Thank you for speaking when I couldn't." I read it twice. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from recognition. There it was, the invisible chain connecting us, every woman who'd been told to be grateful while being diminished. I replied, "You don't owe me thanks, but if you want to make it official, I can put you in touch with my lawyer." By morning, Tracy had received 3 more messages like it. Ethan hadn't just been arrogant, he'd been systematic. Small frauds, emotional leverage, a pattern repeating in different women's lives. Together they formed a timeline, a case. Tracy sat across from me, legal pad in hand. "He's not just a narcissist," she said. "He's a liability in a suit." "Then let's calculate the cost," I said. We gathered testimonies, verified documents, coordinated quietly with Orion's legal department. Every story added another 0 to the moral debt Ethan owed, and every piece of truth, carefully logged, felt like reclaiming oxygen. But karma doesn't always land gently. One night, while locking up the office, I saw a figure leaning by the doorway. My heart stuttered. Ethan. Thinner, paler eyes, bloodshot, but still holding that smirk like a broken weapon. "Long time," he said. "I thought prison visits required clearance," I answered evenly. He laughed, the sound brittle. "Funny. You always did have the sharpest tongue. Congratulations, by the way. Podcast star, financial saint, you must feel holy." "I feel employed," I said. "You should try it." His jaw tightened. "You think you won? You think this makes you powerful?" "I don't think," I said. "I reconcile." He stepped closer, the scent of cheap whiskey surrounding him. "You ruined me." "You did that yourself," I replied quietly. "I just wrote the report." For a moment his face cracked, something raw, almost human flickered there. Then he turned, muttering, "Enjoy it while it lasts." He left before I could answer. Tracy found me minutes later, still by the door. "Was that—" "Yeah." She exhaled. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, though my pulse told a different story. "He's already a ghost. He just doesn't know it yet." The next morning, an alert flashed on my phone: Ethan Ward arrested following civil fraud complaint. The article detailed the investigation: wire transfers, fake investors, tax discrepancies. My testimony was listed as supporting evidence. I didn't smile. Justice isn't joyful. It's quiet, methodical, like balancing a ledger that's been off too long. The irony. The complaint was filed not by Orion, but by Samantha and 2 other women he'd scammed. The system had finally caught up through the voices he'd silenced first. A week later, the hearing was scheduled. I attended not for closure, but for confirmation. Seeing him in that courtroom, the man who once called me lucky, felt surreal. The suit no longer fit. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something smaller, heavier. When the judge read the charges, Ethan's eyes darted toward me. I didn't look away. Afterward, reporters swarmed. One asked Miss Hart, "Do you have anything to say to Ethan?" "Yes," I said simply. "He told everyone I was nothing without him." He was half right because once I left, I became everything. The quote hit headlines within hours. Tracy texted me a screenshot. Lena Hart delivers line of the year. I replied, just good accounting. As the days passed, the noise quieted. My firm thrived. Clients doubled. Lumen Strategies became a name synonymous with rebuilding. Sometimes, though, in the stillness of late nights, I'd think of Ethan not with longing, but with curiosity. What drives someone to destroy the very person who tried to save them? One evening, as I was preparing for bed, a letter slipped under my door. Handwritten. No return address. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Lena, you were right. Love isn't about money, but without money, no one listens to love. There was no apology, no signature, just resignation. I folded the paper, locked it in my filing cabinet under E. Evidence. That's all it was now, another document in a story I'd already closed. Mini-climax revenge wasn't just about him anymore. It had become a platform of proof that silence can mature into influence. And influence, when used right, becomes the kind of justice that multiplies. Outside my window, the city lights shimmered like a balance sheet finally in the black. Tomorrow I'd wake up not as someone who escaped, but as someone who invested wisely this time. Chapter 4. The Collapse of Credit and Pride. Public justice moves like a slow tide, but when it finally reaches shore, everything gets wet. After the arraignment, Ethan's name became a cautionary headline. Blogs framed him as a fallen prodigy. Former clients framed him as a thief with good lighting. I didn't frame him at all. I had work. Lumen Strategies doubled our caseload in a month. Women showed up with folders and hard breaths asking if I could make the past make sense. I told them we wouldn't fix the past. We would itemize it, then build something that wouldn't collapse under a smile. One morning, I woke to an email from Orion Realty's communications team, confirming what rumor already knew. They wanted to sponsor a limited series on financial recovery hosted by Michael Hayes. They wanted me as the first guest and lead consultant. The subject line was plain: opportunity to educate. Tracy wrote back before I did. We'll set terms. Lena retains message control, no ambush, no glamorizing fraud. They agreed in 20 minutes. The studio they rented sat inside a restored warehouse, brick bones and velvet acoustics. When I arrived, a producer led me past lights and cables to a small room lined with still photographs of cities at night. Michael Hayes stood when he saw me. His hand was warm, the grip modest. Lena, thank you for doing this, he said. We want to talk about harm without making it a spectacle. Then let's talk about systems, I answered. One man is a headline. Culture is the story. We ran through segments. Part 1, how love disguises control as care. Part 2, what real financial transparency looks like. Part 3, recovery that isn't performance. I asked for a fourth segment no one had scripted. A table demo of documentation habits any viewer could start tonight. Michael smiled like he'd found the reason he'd invited me. Let's do it. Mic'd up, I felt that strange calm that comes when your story no longer owns you. The red tally light blinked. We began. I spoke like I was talking to the version of me that still apologized for asking to see a receipt. Michael asked what I wish I'd known. That a joint account is not intimacy, it's access. That access without accountability is a liability with a nickname. Halfway through, a producer stepped in, tablet in hand, whispering to Michael. He glanced down, then met my eyes. We have a live update, he said to camera. Orion's internal board has concluded a review related to the misrepresentations tied to former associate Ethan Ward. Effective immediately, Mr. Ward is terminated from all advisory roles and barred from representing any Orion-affiliated entity. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Michael continued, voice steady. We owe our community an apology for believing charisma over compliance. The work of repair starts here. The control room was quiet, in that way rooms get when something inevitable finally happens. The producer mouthed, keep rolling. Michael turned back to me. Lena, you have been on the receiving end of both the man and the system. What does repair look like to you? Repair isn't a press release, I said. It's policy you can't charm your way around. It's restitution that arrives before reputation campaigns. It's education that keeps the next woman from feeling crazy when she's only being careful. We finished the set agenda, then slid into my unscripted segment. I laid out a simple grid on the table, 3 envelopes labeled Evidence, Access, and Exit. I filled each with examples narrating as I went. Evidence holds receipts and timelines. Access holds passwords, lists of shared accounts, and a log of who has what. Exit holds copies of your ID, your credit freeze steps, your safety contacts, your plan. This isn't romance, it's respect. When we wrapped, the crew didn't clap. They breathed out. That sound mattered more. In the green room, a production assistant brought water. Michael leaned against the counter, looking tired in the human way. For what it's worth, he said, I believed him once. Charisma loves a second chance, I replied. Compliance doesn't. His phone vibrated. A message from Orion's board chair. He read it, typed 2 words back, then looked up. The sponsorship for your recovery series is approved, he said. Full season. No notes. I thanked him and meant it. On the drive home, the city looked newly scrubbed. Not redeemed, just honest about its dirt. That night, the episode aired with a live stream chat. I didn't watch comments, I watched faces. Survivors hear voice before they hear vocabulary. My phone buzzed until it felt like another heartbeat. Tracy texted a screenshot of the moment Michael announced Ethan's termination next to my still frame. You didn't flinch, she wrote. Nothing left to flinch at, I replied. 2 days later, I stopped for tea at a quiet bar where afternoons go to think. A muted TV above the counter ran a business segment. The chyron scrolled Ethan's name under the headline, Former Associate Fired During Compliance Broadcast. A man 2 stools down frowned at the screen. That guy sold me a condo in 19, he said to the bartender. Told me he didn't need paperwork to prove he was honest. The bartender wiped a glass. Now he's got paperwork, she said, just not the kind he likes. My tea steeped. The steam smelled like something starting over. The following week, Orion hosted a small press conference to outline the compliance program and the women and wealth fund they'd asked me to shape. I wore a simple dress, and the expression of someone who knows applause is for the cameras, not the work. Michael spoke first, owning the failure without bargaining with it. Then he ceded the mic. Financial abuse thrives in silence, I said. Today isn't a victory lap, it's a syllabus. We're funding education, legal support, and a hotline staffed by people who understand the difference between fear and facts. If you are watching and feel a knot in your stomach because someone calls control care, this program is for you. After the questions, we signed the agreement at a table too shiny for the weight it now carried. Flashbulbs popped, but I kept my eyes on the line where ink met paper. My name used to be a prop in someone else's deck. Now it was a boundary. On the way out, my phone lit with an unknown number. For half a breath, Habit reached for caution. The voicemail transcribed a single sentence. You made me look small. I didn't save the number. I saved the message under documentation. Not because I needed it, but because proof is a kindness you perform for your future self. The mini-climax didn't arrive with handcuffs. It arrived with something quieter. A letter from the court informing me restitution was approved in a small slice of Ethan's case, because my evidence clarified a sequence no one could argue with. The amount wasn't large. It didn't need to be. Restitution, like interest, is a symbol. It says the ledger knows your name, and this time it's spelled correctly. That night, Tracy and I ordered cheap takeout and sat on my floor like we used to when all we had was ideas and rent. She raised a carton. To clean math, she said. To women who file their own endings, I added. We clinked cardboard and laughed in that soft way you laugh when the storm finally understands it isn't welcome. I slept without dreams. Morning brought a sky the color of a balanced sheet. Outside my window, the city didn't look different. I did, because pride collapses like credit when the guarantor is a lie. Ethan had lost both. I had lost the need to watch, and that is the quietest victory of all. Chapter 5, The Return on Silence. Closure isn't an event, it's a practice. By spring of 2025, I had practiced it long enough that it felt like breathing. Lumen's calendar pulsed with workshops and one-on-ones. We kept the name soft on purpose. Strategies, not war. Clients arrived with trembling hands and left with folders labeled plan. It was not dramatic. It was beautiful. The Women in Finance Summit in San Francisco invited me to deliver the keynote on the final day. The theme was simple: value. I rehearsed on planes and in hotel mirrors, but the words only felt right when I imagined speaking to one person, the version of me who still thought boundaries were rude. Backstage, I pinned my mic and checked my notes I wouldn't use. My mother texted a selfie from the audience, her smile wide enough to hold both of us. Tracy sent a line only she could write. Don't be polite, be precise. The stage lights opened like morning. I walked to the center and let the first slide fill the screen. Not a graph. A photograph of my first business card, edges softened by time. Lena Hart, analyst. We talk about money like it is a number I began, but money is a mirror. If someone convinces you to look away, they're not protecting you. They're positioning themselves. I told the room what I wished someone had told me. That love and leverage use the same verbs. That transparency isn't romance, it's respect. That you can freeze your credit without freezing your heart. The auditorium didn't erupt, it leaned in. People scribbled, nodded, stilled. I showed them the 3 envelopes, evidence, access, exit, and the muscle memory of choosing yourself. Near the end, I let silence hold the room. Freedom doesn't arrive when you out-earn someone, I said. It arrives when you stop letting anyone price you. Applause rose like a tide that had been waiting offshore. Backstage, my mother wrapped me in lavender and pride. You don't have to prove anything anymore, she whispered. I'm not proving, I said into her hair. I'm standardizing. Jordan Hale, one of our earliest clients, appeared with flowers the color of sunrise. I got approved for my business line without a co-signer, she said, laughing through tears. The banker asked who taught me to document like that. I said a woman who audited a city. We took a picture none of us needed to remember the moment. After the networking hour, I slipped out a side door into the California light. The air smelled like orange peel and warm concrete. I drove toward Market Street with the windows down and the radio low. That is where I saw it. A new billboard rising above the lanes, clean and gold against the blue. Lumen Strategies, own your worth. Beneath, smaller text, in partnership with Orion Compliance Foundation. The face up there wasn't mine. It was a collage of clients shot from behind, hands on folders, shoulders squared. I had requested it that way. No single savior, a pattern. For a heartbeat, I remembered another billboard years ago, Ethan selling a tower with a grin that promised altitude. That image was long gone. The steel frame held something else now, not revenge, revision. I parked along the curb and stood on the sidewalk among people with errands. No one knew I was looking at my life printed 20 feet tall. That anonymity felt like mercy. I took a photo not for the internet, for the archive I keep, that answers the question, did I do it? Yes. In triplicate. On the flight home, I drafted notes for a new workshop and a short podcast episode. Title, The Return on Silence. The script wrote itself. Silence is not surrender when it is chosen. I recorded later in my office mic, warm room dim. It is space for proof to grow teeth. It is time accruing interest. It is refusing to rent your story to someone else's ego. I closed the file and looked at the stack of envelopes on my desk, waiting for the next workshop. Evidence, access, exit, tools, not weapons. In the weeks that followed, a judge entered a final order in one branch of Ethan's case. The result wasn't dramatic, a schedule for restitution, a line about prohibited activities. The firm dissolved on paper the way it had in practice. I didn't read every page, I didn't have to. Justice had moved from headlines to footnotes where it always belonged. One evening, as the sun cut the city into gold shapes, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Later, curiosity won. A man's voice, careful, not asking for attention. Ms. Hart. I was one of his investors. I watched your summit talk online. Thank you. I wish I had listened to someone like you before. I saved it in a folder called Kindness. Proof matters. So do these. The final scene does not take place in a courtroom or a studio. It takes place in a small community center on a Thursday night where I stand in front of 20 women and 5 men who want to learn what my mother was never taught. We pass around copies of the envelope templates. We practice saying no without apology. We laugh not because anything is funny, but because relief sounds like that. On my way out, a young woman hovers by the door. He says I'll be nothing without him, she murmurs. I hand her 3 envelopes and a card with our hotline. He's half right, I say softly, because once you leave, you'll be everything. She nods, a fraction taller already. Outside, the city exhales. My car smells like paper and oranges. I think of the girl at the charity auction who mistook swagger for safety. I thank her for surviving long enough to learn. He told everyone I was nothing without him. He was half right. When I left, I became everything. CTA. If someone once priced you like a possession, remember this. Your worth is not a negotiation. If this story echoes in your chest, share it, save it, or send it to someone who needs a first step. Revenge does not have to be loud. Sometimes it looks like a folder labeled "Plan a credit freeze filed tonight," a quiet breath that says "not anymore," proof not rage, and the rest will balance itself.